Welcome back to the back room at Luo's Peking House in downtown Oak Park. We are live from Luo's, and our guest today is Riverside Police Chief Tom Weitzel. Thanks for coming here. Tom, you might wonder why a small town police chief would be an interesting guy to talk to. But as we've often talked about, the types of crimes that Riverside Police confront are it's often one of the more colorful beats that we have. But in like other close-in suburban departments, you face the kind of issues that Chicago police face, city police. I mean, every kind of serious incident that you can be confronted with as a police officer, your officers have probably encountered. So, and you're also a very vocal and visible presence among suburban chiefs and in newspapers. So, welcome here, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So
I'm
I think
honored.
another, let's just dive right in. I mean, the issue dominating the Chicago news media in the last 2 weeks about suburban police departments is officer-involved shootings. This is Better Government Association, WBEZ, reporting around, 120
like that,
shootings in the last 10 years. And sort of the role of the Illinois State Police in investigating those, but really the takeaway being zero accountability. That's been the highlight. I think that's
zero discipline.
Zero discipline for any of the police officers involved in those shootings. And now this past week we saw the Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart come out and say, perhaps there should be a third-party investigator outside of the Illinois State Police, whose mandate is very narrowly defined, as we understand it from this reporting, which is, did the policeman or policewoman, the police officer involved in that shooting, did they commit a crime in the commission of that shooting? There's been no findings of criminality in any of that reporting, but so Dart has raised his hand and said perhaps the sheriff's office is an appropriate investigative body. Maybe we start with, what do you think of Dart? And what do you think of the issue of outside investigations or outside arbiters weighing in on these police-involved shootings? What's the appropriate response? And do you think that the Illinois State Police is the body that ought to be handling that? Should there be more than one? Should there be a new office? What's from your vantage point, what's the solution here?
Well, I have the highest respect for Tom Dart. There's nothing personal. I differ with some of his policies for sure. And in fact, yesterday, I received my letter from Sheriff Dart, as did every suburban police chief, offering his service for policy review when it comes to shooting. So some of the information that was put out in the media is kind of inaccurate, because what happens with the suburban police shootings, for example, if you're involved in a shooting, doesn't have to be where you kill the offender, okay? So if you're involved in a shooting where an offender is shot, period, it is protocol for the Illinois State Police Public Integrity Unit to come in and do that investigation. They run it completely separate with their own investigators, and they're all supervisors, and state's attorneys are assigned to that unit. It takes them quite a long time to do their investigation. Typically, the local agency will not get a response back for about 6 months. And then if there's a further response where they have to go to, maybe there is something that was not right, they send that to the state's attorney's office. But the state's attorney is involved right from the get-go when they come to the scene. Tom Dart's suggesting that, okay, the Public Integrity Unit is the right organization to do the suburban police investigations for criminality.
Right.
But who's looking after the police for policy? So once the state police say it's a good shoot, and that's what they will say, or it's not, for whatever reasons, that review goes to the state's attorney. Once the state's attorney agrees with that, then it's given back to the local agency, and Tom Dart is saying, well, what do you do with it, Chief? In Riverside, for example, when the state police have cleared your officer and the state's attorney has cleared your officer, well, we do an internal review. First of all, we're mandated to do that by our insurance carriers. So they require us to be able to do policy development and policy review. But I think Tom Dart is saying, why don't you have another third independent party come in and look at your policies and procedures after these shootings to give it more of a validation process or more of a public stamp that somebody else but your own agency is looking at it. And I think that's unnecessary, at least in my case. We already have the state police doing their investigation. We already have the state's attorney reviewing that investigation. And I can assure you that the state police, if they find something, they're going to tell us. Well, they're not going to have. They're not going to put themselves out there to. There's no covering up going on.
Yeah, I think.
Well, but
I think some of the frustration is, for example, as media, as reporters, is while the state police will do that investigation to determine criminality, and then the state's attorney will determine criminality. First of all, that process is a very long one, as you said. I mean, it can be a year.
We've seen the reports come back more like 2 years later.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, this shooting over here in River Forest was a pretty straightforward shooting, and that was what, 18 months, 20
Something
months?
like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
And
it can
then,
take that long.
then the reports really aren't made available to the
Correct.
public unless you specifically ask for them, and ask for them at the time they're available. For example, I've asked for reports for police-involved shootings in the past. I get turned down because they're not done, and then I ask again, and they're still not done. And then a few months later, I learn, it's done, but I still don't have it. So you have to continually sort it. So there's that.
Yeah, the state police don't see their role as publicizing the findings.
No,
it goes
they
back
don't.
to the police departments, who then have the, I guess, I don't know how motivated they are to publicize those findings themselves.
But I guess apart from the final determination of the state's attorney that, for example, there's no criminality, I wonder if there is any further, even if it's considered a lawful shoot, are there things that officers should have done or could have done that are handled internally that no one will ever know kind of what those determinations were and how they were handled?
And that's the
internally?
policy sort of review that I think you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
For
he
use
wants.
of force and-
I think Sheriff Darts wants to come in and have his policy team review that your officer followed your administrative procedures, not the criminal.
Yeah.
That's been cleared, and he's offering that service. I don't know who's going to take advantage of that. There may be suburbs that do not do anything. I mean, I'm not, I don't have knowledge on all the agencies, but the agencies near me do a review. We go over our policy, but I think he just wants to say, hey, there's a third independent party going through. Why would you not want us to do it? Because if you're okay, it just validates you from a third party.
Right.
But I mean, I didn't even agree with his statement that there were 106 shootings, he said, and no discipline. Well, what's wrong if those 106 shootings were valid? That the officers had to defend themselves
Well, I mean,
or others'
there
lives.
were some very specific examples in that reporting that, I mean, if the SWAT team breaking down that guy's door and basically ramping up a murder, if that's a good shoot, I think a lot of people are troubled by that in the Chicagoland area.
Well,
this wasn't in your department,
yeah.
but this was a suburban
But
police
those
department.
SWAT
that was clean.
operations are different. They're different animals than just an officer responding to a street
Well,
disturbance
but I mean, these
and then
are
firing
police.
shots.
Certainly, this was like the South Suburban SWAT team came out and really ramped up. This was the most egregious example in all that reporting. They really ramped up what sounded like a mental health issue or a paranoid individual, and they basically shot him in his house after a standoff that they created.
Yeah.
They're saying that the police created that
Yes.
stand-up. Well, I differ from that because the police are called there. Okay, so the police are called for some service, and when you go to the SWAT level, that means the patrol level can't handle it, and the SWAT people are well trained. I mean, they're in Riverside, for example. We belong to NIPUS, which is a north and west suburban SWAT team.
Right.
The south suburbs have their own south suburban major case and SWAT team, but they have to be certified by the state. They're trained, and this notion that the police just show up at the SWAT team and kick the door in, and I thought some of that reporting was a little suspicious because they're called there for a purpose. I mean, and what's happening inside that house, I definitely read the same article you did, and there was a mental health issue. No, probably without doubt. But half of those cases we deal with these police officer involved shootings have some portion of some type of health issue, whether mental
Sure.
health issue. There's some issue there But the officers really don't have the ability to evaluate that when the situation is going down. Unless it's long, drawn out, and the family's there, and the family tells you, my son is barricaded in the basement. He has mental health issues. He's under doctor's care. I mean, it's a slowed down process. Well, then I think we should slow down too. But most SWAT teams will wait. Most of the time, they'd rather negotiate their way out.
And I don't want to get bogged down in this one example, right? But I do think, one of the big findings there was the number of people that are involved, get shot by police who are mentally ill, and how do suburban police departments handle interactions with people in mental health
so,
crisis.
Prior to your officers getting involved in a situation like that, what training do they go through? How are they prepared ahead of time to confront something like that?
Well, in the last 2 years, they've taken the Illinois Training Standards Boards for police officers has taken a real initiative to train local police on handling the individuals with mental issues. Now, before that, there was very little. It was probably the police academy and whatever your local department would send you to. But as there got to be more national attention towards police dealing with people have mental issues on the street, because what the problem is that they're kicking them out of the hospitals and they're roaming the streets, right? And their behavior is weird, and you get calls of a 25-year-old man standing on the corner banging his head on the tree, and people get alarmed by that, right? And the police respond for like a well-being check to see what he's like, and these are how these confrontations start. So now they've started to train the police on how to recognize that, how to evaluate that, and how to get that medical attention if needed. Before, it was if we rolled up on a scene, it was probably call the paramedics.
Right.
That's probably what happened, because we didn't know how to handle it, right? And the paramedics would bring him to the hospital, and the hospital would say, the ER would say, there's really nothing, physically wrong with him. He's not suffering a heart attack. If you can't kidnap somebody, so if they don't want to be checked in for treatment,
right,
they're being released hours later. So there's this cycle where the police take them, the ambulance respond, they go to the ER, they come back, and they're out. Because the hospitals are not going to force somebody to be in their wards unless they're displaying really, really odd behavior, or they're threatening the life of somebody or something like that in public. Because even the police have a really difficult time getting somebody committed for a 72-hour evaluation. The threshold's very high because, right, this is America. We're not, the police aren't allowed to just take you and kidnap you because your behavior is odd. So we a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, well, he was acting weird. Why didn't you take him to the hospital? Well, we did. Well, why is he back out 2 hours later? He doesn't want to self-check himself in.
Right.
And there's nothing medically wrong with him, medically in the sense of he needs to be in for medical care.
In your career, how long have you been a police officer?
33 years.
So 33 years. Have you seen a change in the posture? I think you're hinting at this, but a posture from the police toward mentally ill people. It sounds like maybe at one time there was called the ambulance. Certainly there must have been a time when it was like maybe put somebody in cuffs and things got escalated. But what in Riverside, if we're going to use your department as an example, what is your policy around interacting with somebody who's displaying those kinds of signs? Is there a policy to de-escalate confrontation with an individual? And that's my first question. And two, what sort of less than lethal options do your police officers have in the event that somebody is displaying strange or threatening behavior that might be attributable to some episode? Do they have an option besides shooting the person is what I really want to ask.
Absolutely. No question. We do de-escalation training. That's new.
Yeah.
So the Illinois Training Standard Board has just come out with that like the last year, and it's so popular that there's waiting lists to get our officers in months. They only run a certain amount of classes. What really needs to happen with the de-escalation training is they need to teach it in the police academy. So
and right now that isn't part of the curriculum?
That is not done. So that is something that they need to do. They need to teach it to rookies coming right out of the academy. I believe that they want to do that, but that's where we need to catch up. And there are less than lethal options. So if we encounter somebody with a mental health issue, they're acting bizarre, you first have to evaluate actually whether they really do need the paramedics or not, right? I mean, is there anything physically wrong with them? If there isn't, we have other options. So they teach you that you can reach out to family. If they won't give you that information. Do they want us to take them somewhere? Now, I've allowed my officers go beyond my border. For example, if somebody lives in LaGrange or somebody lives here in Oak Park, if my officers are able to transport that person to somebody here that could help take care of them, like their own family members, because it's not uncommon that a family member say, I just can't get there. He went out for a walk and he ended up in your town, and I don't have a car, or I don't have the ability to go pick my 25, 30-year-old son up. We will take them there. We will go that extra mile to do that, because that de-escalates the situation too. And sometimes you just have to say, what services can we provide you? Because it's, if they're sitting on the park bench in the park, that's not illegal.
Right.
And sometimes in my towns, residents will, they see somebody that he looks a little disheveled maybe, and they look a little bit out of place, and they call us to check on them, make sure that they're okay, and then we leave, right? Because they are. And then 10 minutes later, we get a call in the police station, is, why? Well, your officers did nothing. Well, yes, we did, and he's not kidding. They're not committing a criminal act. We can't do anything more than what we did. We can't remove him from the village just because he's sitting on the park bench and you don't like the clothes he's wearing.
And he doesn't have a resident permit for Riverside.
So I guess part of that is we need to educate better. I think we need to educate the public better what we can and can't do. If they're a danger, we will take acts. But just because it doesn't fit into what you think should be in the park, for example, doesn't mean that we can just shoo him along somewhere else. That's not lawful.
Mm-hmm. I want to circle back to police-involved shootings just a little bit, because I'm just curious. Your department became involved in a police-involved shooting in Lyons. I think it was last year, wasn't it?
Yes.
Last summer?
Yes.
This was a guy who had murdered his wife in DeKalb and was driving back and led police through several towns. This thing ended up coming to a head at Joliet Avenue and Ogden Avenue, and your officers were involved. Can you, in the wake of that incident, what what was talked about within your department about how to, confront those situations? Did you have specific, a specific response and message to your officers in response to that?
I did. So I responded to the scene. Took me a little bit to get there. I was actually in Michigan that weekend at a wedding. Had come back. When I got there, the scene was still very active. It was a situation where the offender shot at the police first. We had plenty of witnesses for that. Like you said, he had murdered his estranged wife up in DeKalb. He was headed back to Michigan, actually. That's where he lived. Immediately, what happened in that is probably what we talked about a little bit earlier, the newspaper article. The State Police Public Integrity responded to the scene. They took over the entire investigation. My officer, per my policy, we drove him to LaGrange Hospital, because what we have to do on our policy when officers are involved in shooting is they get drug tested, and we take urine from them so that we can say that he was not under the influence of alcohol, he was not under the influence of drugs, and we have them blow on the breathalyzer. So we have that in our policy so that down the road we can say our officer had no drugs in his system, had no alcohol, and here's the proof of that, and that's part of the investigation. Then I relieved him from duty. The state police confiscated the guns, and they start their investigation. And like you said, it's lengthy. Ours isn't even back yet.
Right. Yeah, I've asked about that one.
So it's not back yet. So, and then what I did is he's put on leave, and then we offer our employee, first off, like health issues. For example, our employee assistance program. So we mandate that he go to somebody initially to speak about the shooting, where they don't have to report back to me. It's completely confidential. They don't have to make a report to the chief, because it's between the therapist, so to speak,
the counseling
and the officer.
session.
And then they come back, and then as far as the department, we had a debriefing about a month after that with the officer himself and the command staff. And then when I held my staff meeting, which was probably about 3 months later, we openly talked about it at the staff meeting. There's nothing to hide. It was a public event anyways. And we kind of go over how the situation went. In my case, what I did is I got the police radio tapes of the actual call, and I got anything I could. So when we were sitting at the staff meeting, we could play and listen to how it developed and how it went down, and we critiqued it to see if there's anything we could have done better. It was a situation really where we were asked to assist, so it wasn't the officer just happened to be there, and that officer that happened to be there was very well trained. But and then then I reached out to the police chief from Lyons because it was his jurisdiction, and we got together, and we talked about whether we thought that the departments acted cohesively, because that shooting involved the state police themselves, the Lyons Police Department, and Riverside. All those jurisdictions were there, and I sat down with the chief from Lyons and we discussed it, and to see if he had any issues or was he satisfied with the response, because they asked us for mutual aid. So I wanted to make sure. So we went through it. We don't hide that information. So, and I think it went well. And then later on, about 5 months after it, the state police held a debriefing at the Des Plaines office for any officer that was at the scene who wanted to come debrief the situation. So my officer went, and the Lyons officers went, and the state troopers were there. They were there without the bosses. So the investigators and then everybody there that was at the scene. So I think, it went well. And the officers have multiple opportunities to talk to somebody when I'm not there as authority, and they don't think that there have any punitive issues with me.
And so you're able to do effectively a policy review of your officer-involved shooting without the results of the Illinois State Police investigation?
Yes. So, because, see, mine's administrative. Theirs is criminal, like we've talked about. And if I was going to wait for the state police to do a policy interview, I mean,
you'd have a cop off the street.
We've had some of our SWAT team members in the NIPUS where we're waiting for the reports 2 years. So
Right. Yeah.
I can't wait that far. I understand their methodical investigation, but we can't wait that long because it's not fresh.
Would there be any utility in this example? Would there have been, or do you think there would have been any utility, or would have been useful to have? And I'm not raising Tom Dart's hand. I don't know that he's the right person or his office, but would it have been useful to you to have an outside agency X make a policy determination that you made?
Now, I'm not for that. I think there's enough review. But saying that, if Sheriff Dart or his people wanted to come in and we were to use their services, then make it professional, right? And make it a clean review with a timely report, right? Some type of timely document that they're issuing back to us, some type of short report memorandum that tells us, you could have done this better, or you did, or if they did it right, you did it right. And don't make it political. This is not, you don't need to put the police officers under this political review, okay? And part of that, my problem with Sheriff Dart issues, it may become a political event. If he's looking to help us in policy review.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't think that those reviews should be, for example, verbatim made public. Now, if he wants to say that that Sheriff Dart's office came in, his policy review, and we reviewed with Riverside their things, and there's some report done on what he did, that's fine. There was summary report, whatever. But these officers have to give statements. They have to, they'd have to sit down with their investigators and talk. They'd have to, go through everything. Like, what were you doing that day? What you did before? What's your training? They'd go through the officers' training files. I think some of that information needs to be disclosed in the investigation, right? But doesn't need to be disclosed to the public. I do believe that there needs to be a report issued. I have no problem with that. Some type of report saying.
I think one concern here is public. You're concerned about public disclosure, and that if somebody other than your department handles this review, that would be potentially leaked.
Well, I'm not so much worried about the public has a right to know. No problem. The details, like the actual officers' verbatim statements and stuff, no, I don't think that those need to be. You have to remember, these officers are still working, right? They're still out there. They're still testifying in court. They have other court cases. Unless the Sheriff Dart said this, he came out with some report that said this was horrible. Okay, so you didn't do a single thing right, even though they cleared you criminally. And here's the Riverside policies, right? Your officer didn't follow one of those policies administratively. So what should happen to him? Should he be suspended? Should he be disciplined? Should he be retrained?
Well, we have an active example of one path that could be taken in Chicago. I mean, they have an independent police review authority. Is that too political? Is there information coming out about Chicago police-involved shootings, officer-involved shootings, that is, I don't know, that either harms their ability to function as a peace officer? Is that a possible
what my
example?
My preference would be, and I've floated this for a long time, and people they kind of just push me to the side, but I think that there should be a unit, the state police, with the state's attorneys, not in Cook County, I think the Illinois Training and Standards Boards should partner with the state police and the state's attorneys in every county, and every single police-involved shooting should be investigated by a professional agency that comes in from outside. I don't care if you're shot in Rockford or you're in Peoria. That these trained investigators with state's attorneys from the counties and the resources to back that up, the evidence you need, they should come and investigate those cases in all police shootings and put the political aspect out of it. I mean, I would have no problem with if you took the politics out of Cook County. So if my officers were involved in a shooting and the state police came in and investigated and the state's attorneys assigned were from Peoria County, I could care less. I think that would be better.
So you think that there are potentially political motivations by politicians or others in Cook County that run counter to professional policing in these reviews?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, police issues make good headlines. So, and it
Yes.
can further one's political career. And I think that sometimes they're done for the right reasons, and other times they're politically motivated, and they want some recognition or praise for bringing a new idea. And is it really working though? What's behind that headline? Go, follow up 2 years later and see what's there. Did it actually work?
So it sounds to me, I mean, let's keep DART out of it, is what you're saying, and let's keep and maybe find a way to professionalize and institutionalize
Right.
a review process that is supported by, I don't know, elected officials, but also by experts in
this
policing.
isn't breaking any groundwork.
Right.
You can look in other states
Yes.
where they have a unit that investigates every police-involved shooting. It's the same group. If they're independent, and they come to you. Now, it may take a little bit, but you have to hold the scene. They come to you, and they take over. So they're the authority. The Riverside Police Chief no longer has authority.
Mm-hmm.
When they show up, what they say goes. And it's independent, and they do timely reports, and those reports are made public. I mean, I can cite other states that do that. Why don't we follow that model? Why don't we go to the Illinois Training and Standards Board, who sets all the training standards for every academy in the state? Why don't we get them involved with professional investigators, and they come out and take over and do it? Mm-hmm. That'd be
Okay.
Listen, they spend a lot of money on training in Illinois on things that we don't really use in law enforcement, so let's spend the money on something we do. Because there's enough hours. My officers come out of the police academy like sharpshooters. Okay, there's enough firearms training.
Yeah.
We need more de-escalation training. We need more report writing. We need more how to deal with conflict. All they need there is 1 week of firearms training. You either pass the firearms training or you don't. So part of those old ways need to be changed. I'm a proponent that the state police academies, not the state police, but the academies, all need to be fundamentally, their curriculum needs to be changed from top to bottom. It's 2018. We need to move on to different.
Well, that
training
point about the
methods.
sharpshooters, it's like a hammer in search of a nail, right? I mean, that's a very interesting
Right.
point.
And when
we don't need more. We don't need a lot of military service in our neighborhoods.
And if we're not getting these officers when they come out of the that's where you get them.
Yeah.
They go right from the academy to field training. Once they learn that stuff in basic, they'll bring it with them their whole life. So that's really where we need to get the basic training at, is right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Right now, I think the police academy in Illinois is 12 weeks, and then they're going to increase it to 14 weeks. They're going to add another 2 weeks on. And that's for some of this mandated training that the state has been, the de-escalation,
Where do you have how many sworn officers in Riverside?
19, including me.
Okay. And where do they come from? What's their background?
We're
vets?
mandated by state law on the testing. I do have veterans. I have one that's deployed to Africa right now.
You've been without him for a year.
Yeah, and he's not going to be back till September. I do have Spanish-speaking officers. I do have African-American officers. I have most of them are college educated. Certainly the newer ones coming on are all college educated. They're highly motivated. It's a very competitive field. So if you see somebody on the top 5 of our list, they're on the top 5 of about 20 different police departments, because they go from test to test until somebody hires them. And I think that's a good thing, because it is competitive. The one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to get officers that are pushed from department to department, and the chief doesn't tell you why they got rid of them.
Right.
Right.
One of those just made headlines last year for the drop gun issue, right?
Right.
I think you were. I think it was North
No,
Riverside
the-
who arrested
yeah,
him.
Yeah. A couple of things I just want to touch on. This is, I guess, kind of related to police-involved shootings, except kind of in reverse. You're one of the rare police officers who's actually been on the other end of that situation. Can you talk about that and sort of how it informs, how you approached policing and what your message is, to the people that you supervise?
Yeah, so I was shot in the line of duty many years ago at 3 a.m. in the morning. I was only on the job 3 years, and I wasn't doing anything special. So I was on patrol, and I saw a car that was illegally parked, and my intention was to put a parking ticket on it at 3:15 in the morning. I didn't have license plates, so I had to get out of the car to get that VIN number off of it. And when I got out of the car, somebody in the back rolled out of it, dressed in all dark, and they had a pump shotgun, kind of like with birdshot you'd use for hunting.
Sure.
And they racked it, and they shot me. Thank God I had a bulletproof vest on, because most of the birdshot was taken into my chest.
And this is 1987?
Correct. August.
So how much? What percentage of police officers were wearing bulletproof vests at that point?
Very rare. Very rare.
Why were you wearing one?
My wife had purchased mine. Mine was called a point blank. It wasn't back then. That wasn't even a really big manufacturer. So my wife had purchased that for me when I got the job. My village did not purchase them back then. You had to buy them on your own.
What town was this?
Riverside.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't purchase them, and that was standard. I mean, we weren't any different than anyone else at the time. They did after this shooting. But so to make a long story short, the guy that lived in the house in front of there, he was a parole officer, and he had denied parole for a gang member. It was being held in Cook County Jail, and they were coming to kill him. That was the idea for denying the parole. So some 7 years later, they got a break in the case through a weapons arrest that ATF made, and they identified the offenders. However, the statute of limitations in Illinois for attempt murder of a police officer at that time was 3 years.
Wow.
So they
So
couldn't
no
prosecute
charges on
that
that.
case. And then what happened is that changed. So at that time, Judy Bartopinka, who was a Riverside resident, was a state senator, or she might have even been a representative at that time. She floated legislation to change that, and the law was changed because of her efforts.
To extend that
Yes.
that window.
And
So
how did that affect you as a police officer? Does it make you jumpy? Does it make
Yeah, it
you
was.
approach your job differently?
it was pretty traumatic. My wife she wanted me not to come back.
I'll bet.
She did not want. She wanted me to give up, but this was my profession. This is what I did. So we were newly married. I didn't want to give up the job, although I was under pressure. But one of my things was the department was ill prepared to handle it. That was for sure. So the chief at that time and the department, he didn't really know what to do. So when I came back to work, they're like,
Oh, in terms of your recuperation
yeah,
as
it was
a
like,
as a
we're going to
person.
send you to somebody to talk to, or they sent me to somebody to talk to that I had to go to that was like, had no police experience at all.
Yeah.
It was terrible, absolutely horrible. Then they didn't know what to do with me, so they actually, the chief's order at that time, when I came back to work after 3 weeks after that, I could not ride by myself. So he made me ride in a squad car for over a month with another officer because he felt I would overreact. That's what he said. And then finally I had to go into his office one day and I said, Chief, you either want me back or you don't.
Right.
I'm okay. I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to do it. But he was all nervous, so I would ride with somebody. Then they finally let me go. But it changed my perspective on, I know what it's like to be shot. And luckily, my only injuries were some facial injuries and my broken ribs from the shooting and some broken blood vessels. Outside of that, was very lucky. And so I think when I talk to officers about that, I hope and I have some credibility.
Right.
I don't talk about it often anymore. In fact, probably the newer officers, they probably wouldn't even know that. But the old timers would. And it was a very, that just shows you, right? I was going to put a parking ticket on it.
Right.
I wish I could say that it was some dramatic thing that happened, right? That I was like pursuing somebody, but it was a mundane 3 o'clock in the morning parking ticket that led to this. It was a very uneventful night leading up to that. There was nothing special.
Mm-hmm. And part of that, I wonder what goes through your minds because you have 3 sons, all of whom are police officers, all of whom well, I know at least two of whom are patrol officers. I don't know about the third because I'm not as familiar with him. What do you talk to them about that? What and what was your message about having been in that situation and how to, prepare themselves?
So I did talk to them initially because they were too young, but as they grow older, I did. And before they took the job in law enforcement, I did. I didn't force them into law enforcement like many might think because I have 3 boys that are all in there, and my wife wants to know why they can't be an accountant like her.
Good desk job.
But I did talk to them about it, and I told them they should always wear a bulletproof vest because some officers still today don't like to do that. Yeah. And every department buys you your vest now. I know of no agency that does not purchase your vest for you. So there's no reason not to wear it. And actually, my policy in Riverside is if we purchase it, you wear it. It says we own it, we buy it.
Part of the uniform.
But I did talk to them about it. I talked to them about how that was just like we talked about, just a mundane parking ticket situation. I didn't even have time to prepare, so these things can just happen like that. Mm-hmm. They just happens, and it didn't discourage them. I think it just made them realize that it's a dangerous job. And even in suburban policing, we don't have the same as Chicago, obviously, the metro, but it's not like we don't have anything either.
So how do you balance that sort of danger, which also could be interpreted as a threat? It's not unheard of that some police officers approach their job as though the neighborhoods that they're policing are dangerous and that there's constant threat. I don't work in that kind of setting, but how do you balance the need to function as a community police-minded person, or just a person who can engage with individuals, but also knowing that you write a ticket and somebody might jump out of a trunk and shoot at you? How do you function professionally?
That can be difficult. It starts with training, for sure. You have to train. But you also, I tell my officers, treat people like they're your mother. And I actually say that to them. So that's the way you started out, okay? So if the situation escalates, you're not the one, escalating the situation. If you need to take action, take action. If you can de-escalate it, de-escalate it. And I told them, don't get offended by these. Nobody likes getting stopped by the police, right? Nobody likes getting a ticket. Nobody does. Just the other day, my wife got a red light ticket for going through the red light, and she went online. Yeah.
Where did she get it? Huh?
She got it on Route 83 out in Willowbrook.
Okay. Not in Harlem and Surmac.
Yeah, right.
So my wife got one, and she went online to watch it, right? And she actually did go through it, but she didn't like it. So,
not a bit.
So nobody likes it, and you don't expect that to be. And I said, and just be polite and be judicious, and everybody isn't against you, right? And everybody, I don't like to use this word, but sometimes police officers can get very jaded, right? Everyone isn't a scumbag. Okay, they're not.
Right.
They're not. So don't get that mindset, okay? Start out, and I'm lucky in Riverside, our residents are extremely supportive of the police department. I know that's not true in all communities.
Well, don't you have a bunch of prosecutors and judges from criminal court?
But they're just generally, they want good policing. Mm-hmm. They expect professional policing. They expect us to have college-educated kids coming in the job. They expect their uniforms to look good, and they expect their training to be top-notch. Yeah. And they support, you know how the community supports us? By giving us, money for equipment. They support the budget that supports us getting equipment so the officers can do their jobs and the community programs we do.
And you just had somebody donate $1,000 for Narcan.
Yes. That husband and wife, they came into the police department lobby and walked into my office and gave it to me. I didn't receive it in the mail. This is really, these are residents that are engaged and they care.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we want to deliver the service back. I want my officers and my frontline people that are in the 911 center, for example, to be able to answer the phone with professionalism and talk, because most of the time people just want answers. Yeah. And you probably know that they do. They want answers. Mm-hmm. And, usually we can give answers. It's pretty rare that we can't give an answer. Right. That's a misnomer. Somebody says that 99% of the time we can give an answer to the residents on what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. While you certainly have addressed the support you've received locally, you were dealt a fairly harsh rebuke
Yeah.
in the local newspaper this past week regarding kind of a controversial topic, I think, especially among police, with respect to the new county policy on bond. The person who wrote that letter, a former Riverside Village trustee who was the village board liaison to the police department, who was on the board when you were hired as chief. Also was a public defender, so he's coming to the conversation from that aspect. You have criticized the county's position on setting bonds, and this was a criticism of that position. Can you just talk about that, and also talk about being sort of the target of someone who you know pretty well?
Yeah, so I have the highest respect, actually, for Kevin Smith. We're just on the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to this issue. So the bond process, I have a very strong opinions about the bond process. I think it's not working as is being touted by the judiciary, the courts, the chief judge. So, to make myself educated and to be validated, I put on a suit and tie, and I went over to the bond court, and I sat in the bond court, and I witnessed 28 bond hearings, and 27 of them walk out the door either on an I-bond for a signature, electronic monitoring, or a very, very low bond. And I witnesses judges lean over the bench and ask the defendant how much money he has on him or his family has on him in court. I don't think that should be the judge, that should be the bar that we're using for bonds. But there needs to be a set policy. What is your
Related
criminal
to the
history?
offense.
How many times have you skipped bond in the last time? How many warrants have you had for your arrest? Do you have ties to the community, right? Because you're not going to flee.
Mm-hmm.
If you've lived in Oak Park your whole life, you're probably still
live in
going to
Oak
be
Park.
here. There needs to be this evaluation done to say, okay, well, this person isn't a risk. This isn't a flee, because bond is supposed to ensure that you come back to court, right? So, I saw some pretty violent, what I would consider violent individuals. Certainly the crime they committed was egregious, in my opinion. And they were either given very low bonds or electronic monitoring. And you walk out the door. So once you're fitted with that bracelet, you're gone. Now, they
But
do
don't you have a
monitor
date with a judge?
You do. You follow up court
and if you
dates.
don't show up for that,
Right.
you got a real problem, right?
And if you go outside of what the the electronic monitoring guidelines are, if you have to stay in your house 8 to 4 or whatever the guidelines are, they supposedly can revoke that. But the bond, I witnessed these individuals getting out on bonds, and they were criticizing me, saying, you think everybody should be in bond. No, but let's look at the background, let's look at the history, let's look at their bond forfeitures, let's look at everything, do a review, and then have the same process for every single prisoner that comes in there to bond court. I am not, and I'm going to make it clear, I am no way saying that everybody should be held in custody. Everybody should be, given a high bond. Absolutely not. But there needs to be a set process for that.
And this is a theme, I think, in this interview. It sounds like, and you mentioned Tim Evans without using his name, but it sounds to me like you perceive this cash bond reform as politicizing the criminal justice system in Cook County. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes. And
so what's the politics? What's the problem?
Well, first of all, they're under a lot of pressure to empty the jails because of money, for sure. I just saw something quoted yesterday or the day before that they're down to $200,000 a month in overtime at the county jail versus like $2 million when they were over 10,000 detainees, right? So there is this financial aspect
but
of it.
Outside of the finances, isn't there a justice issue about keeping poor people locked up awaiting trial, but for the ability to pay $500 or pay $1,000? There's an individual who's sitting in jail right now whose crime was stealing $300 worth of DVDs from Walmart and then running from the scene, and he ended up being shot. He's still in jail. Part of his issue, I am guessing, is that he can't cover his bond.
And part of his issue might be his criminal history. I mean, so
Fair
that's
enough.
why they have 50 prior arrests and 20 convictions. So that's a person that's a repetitive offender. He's going to probably flee. He's probably not going to come to court.
Yeah, this
But-
guy's a junkie.
Yeah.
I mean, so to be frank,
And
what do we do?
I don't believe that narrative that about the economic status, because here. So when the police respond anywhere, and take it for your town that has a mall. 90% of those mall arrests, the police are just responding to picking up somebody, right, that's detained by
But isn't it-
by security.
who's accusing the police of arresting poor people? Isn't the issue making arrests and then poor people sitting in jail because they can't go their bond?
Well, Sheriff Dart's office made a statement that the jails, with the population down 50%, that people aren't lingering in the jails who are poor economic status, who just couldn't get out because of the bond, right? So
Right.
they were making an allegation almost that somehow we know somebody's economic status, right? So when the police respond to a retail theft and we take somebody into custody, we don't ask them,
No.
do you have a job? How much money you
Right.
make? What's
Your
sta-"
your
But
job is to, like, remove a threat.
their implication was that somehow we know that we're locking up people who are poor.
No,
Oh,
I don't think that's right. I guess what my response to that is, police, your job is to go there and address the situation, make the arrest,
Yeah.
and then after that, it's really not it's out of your hands.
I agree.
So
Show up for court, those sorts of
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, the court is determining that this is the way they want to, proceed. And
Yeah, what is your concern about bond as a policing issue?
That
Cash
it's
bond
putting
reform.
criminals, it's putting dangerous individuals back out into the street that also are not only a risk to the public but to officers. The more you're not held accountable for something, the more emboldened they become. And believe me, there's still police contact.
Isn't there plenty of evidence that the most violent gunmen for Chicago street gangs have no problem bonding out? These are true killing machines.
Yeah,
right?
there are individuals who
So-
they have, their gangs have money for sure, and they will bond them out.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we can't bar their release if
No.
they can post their bond.
Yes.
So short of truly providing no access to freedom before trial, do we not offer bond?
No, I think the bond system just needs to be fair, equitable, and the same pattern. I believe that the bond issue now has become a 100% financial issue. That they have a mandate to reduce the population of the Cook County Department of Corrections. That there's this mandate that we need to get down. We need to get to a certain level, okay? And that is strictly based on finances, not based on risk analysts. Any data that would say, this person isn't a risk for whatever, recommit, flight. You're never going to be perfect.
Sure.
So there's always going to be. But if you read some of these reports and some of these press releases that come out and statements, every single one of them touts reduction in the cost of housing prisoners. Right? Even at the state level, they at the state prisons.
And there may be that may be politically expedient. Taxpayers like to hear about cost savings. But let me ask a question that I think flows logically from your argument. If we had more resources in Illinois, should more people be in jail?
More resources.
If we had more money, if we had more money to lock people up, should more people be locked up?
No, I don't. If we had more resources, then put those resources to something that could be better used in the criminal justice system, so people stay out of jail.
Sure.
But they just dropped. The Cook County just eliminated the drug diversion program. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah,
The
it's
drug
gone.
school?
Yeah, drug school.
No.
Now what?
Well, that was
Now
an
the cases are
alternative.
dismissed and they're dropped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now those are for lower level
Yeah.
narcotics cases, but that was actually a really good program. Okay, it was like a deferred prosecution.
Right. It was if you went through drug school,
Yeah.
the charges would be
Yeah.
dropped.
Now that was a really, in my opinion, was a really good thing.
And was that withdrawn? Is that a financial issue?
It
or
is.
Is that a political issue?
No, that's a budget issue. They say that it's one of the programs that had to go when the soda tax beverage was. So that's part of the state's attorney's
answer
cuts.
to that. Okay.
You know, I mean, I know they had to save people's jobs, prosecutors, which is probably very important. But I mean, there was a really good program that I think should have stayed. That's just my opinion.
We're kind of running along here, but there's one other thing I wanted to get to before we left. You are very active in terms of being available to media, to reaching out to media. You have a Twitter feed that has tweeted out how many times, Brett? Almost 4,000.
Yeah,
It's like that.
Really churning out the tweets.
It's an interesting policy. You've embraced social media with respect to getting message out about kind of criminal activity, but also getting messaging out itself. Tell me about your the purpose of that Twitter feed, how you want it to act, and also who's responsible for it.
Well, I'm responsible for it. I developed it because I was either going to do the Facebook or the Twitter. And initially, I'm like, Twitter seems easier. You know, my time is very limited. So I did that, and it's been successful. I encourage our residents to follow. So you put out the little.
So you
blinks.
are at Riverside PD?
Yeah. So at Riverside PD is me.
Every tweet that goes out is
Yes.
you're pressing
Okay,
the
good.
button.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
I
good to know. I
may end up getting a Facebook account, but I get one of my newer, younger officers to set up the Facebook and be that.
I like the Twitter feed.
But
you know,
it's
an
been,
interesting.
you know, my village government is a true believer in open and transparent government, and that's not giving you a line there. They believe in it, so I fed into that, and I also been to media training. So I went to extensive media training through the Illinois Chiefs Association. It was actually taught by a former WGN broadcaster named I can't remember, Rick Rosenthal.
Sure.
So Rick Rosenthal comes in, he puts on these 3 series of, he puts on a class on how to write a press release, the basic, right? Then he puts on how to do a news conference, and then you have interaction with him. And then he puts on a seminar on how to interact and, you know, what to do, like if you're out on a scene where they're doing a live feed. And the Illinois Chiefs of Police hired him to help train chiefs. And I went to all of his series, and his series was like, hey, you know what, get your story out, okay? Because they're going to put something out regardless. Don't believe that they're not going on the television. So they're going to put out their story anyway, so get your information in and get the facts out, and whatever happens, at least you've had yours. But I've also found out that my residents, and like me, like for example, they want that information, right? So they want to make informed decisions. How can residents make informed decisions if we don't let them know burglaries are taking place on the 200 block of Akenside in Riverside? If we don't put that out, you know, how do they know?
They may not be watching the
And those are
garage
those
or-
that tell me sometimes, well, you know what, don't put that information out because it makes something look bad.
I just heard this from a Riverside resident when I told him we were going to
you know,
interview
it makes them look. I'm like, no. Here, don't you want the information to be informed? Is what happening? You don't want the police to withhold that. I mean, you get to then you say I better should lock my car at night, right? Or you see that maybe I should leave my outside lights on by the garage. But I want my residents to be informed, and we put out as much as we can so that then they can make decisions for them and their family on how to better protect themselves, how to get the information, and they know what's happening within the Riverside Police Department to the extent we do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been good. I've personally had a lot of feedback, positive feedback on it, and
I mean, you do mix it up. I mean, there are like polar bears at the zoo and a deep
Yeah.
freeze. I mean, so
well,
there's,
since
like,
the zoo's
man
kind of
bites
in our
dog.
jurisdiction, I think I used to work. I was a zoo police officer before I was in Riverside.
Always high reader interest in the animals for sure.
So I do like that. I do try to mix it up, but I don't believe in keeping information from people. That's not. You know what? If that's what people want, I'm not the person for them. I really am not.
How do other police chiefs respond to you? Do they roll their eyes? It's like, oh, Weitzel sent out another press release. He's tweeting again. Do you get any chiefs saying, why are you doing this?
Some. And today and Friday, I got a call from the commander of Oak Park Police Department that he wants me to help him set up their Twitter account.
Really?
Yeah. So
you're
interesting.
you're a pioneer.
So there's both
social
sides.
media.
There's both sides. There's
That's
those that
fascinating.
think there's too much, and then there's those that think, hey, this is a really good program. I'd like to do it. But I'm telling you, the ones that think it's too much and the ones that think you shouldn't be forthright with the public and what happens, those are the dinosaurs, and they're dying. The younger chiefs coming up, the people being promoted, are all coming up in the same. They're coming up in the social the network of of Facebook and all that. They want to get their message out, and they want to get factual information out. So the ones that criticize me are really the dinosaurs. The profession is changing.
I want to ask two related questions to Bob. So do you conceive of your Twitter feed, which is a little personal, it sounds like, do you conceive of it as informational? Because to me, I follow it now, having moved to North Riverside, and I'm a train commuter in downtown Riverside, so I'm invested. But you're not simply posting about car crashes on First Avenue. There is a political undercurrent in your tweeting, especially around this issue of it's called always remember.
Yes.
These police officers. Why do you post about a German Shepherd police canine unit or canine who died or killed in the line of duty? There were some police officers in Pennsylvania who were involved in a shooting, trying to serve a warrant. Why use the Riverside Twitter account to tweet out about national police issues?
Well, my view of that is we don't live in a bubble. It's a global community. We're beyond that. I want people to know that the police work is dangerous. It's hard. I'm a dog lover, so it makes me. I'm very sad when the dogs are killed.
Right.
And I think some of those are brutal. I think when those dogs are killed in the line of duty, I think it's a very sad thing, and they're very much part of the department. The national issues on law enforcement, whether police officers killed in the line of duty, I tweet out some of the information from the National Law Enforcement Memorial Fund, which posts when police officers are killed in the line of duty. And I want people to see that's a human. This is a human face. Here's a 25-year-old officer. He's married, 2 children, was responding to a domestic, walked up the door, was shot and killed. In the police field, that's a big deal.
Right.
Almost every chief probably gets that, is signed up to get those notifications anyways. I just send them out. I also forward them or retweet them as part of my Twitter account, just so people know that that is my way of saying, hey, this is a really dangerous job. I have 3 sons in this profession. Yeah. I want you to know that these men and women, they put their life on the line for their communities, wherever that community might be. They're caring individuals, and there's a face behind that. It's not just this uniform and this robot that responds to your calls for service.
Would you, I guess this is my last question on this point. I haven't seen you tweet anything out about controversial officer-involved shootings around the country. There are several very high-profile ones right now.
Yes.
Why not?
I don't do that or haven't done that because most of those aren't complete. They're just, they're news articles that police-involved shootings, such and such a location.
As an example, an Oklahoma City police officer was just charged in December with second-degree murder for shooting a man who was attempting to kill himself. He was trying to burn himself, self-immolate, and instead this police officer shot him 4 or 5 times and killed him. That's now a criminal justice issue. I understand why it might not fit your Twitter handle. I guess I just feel compelled to ask.
Well,
you're choosing
that's a good
to
point.
curate it a certain way, and to me, it's like there is a political dimension to the.
Yeah, I get your point.
Policing is dangerous. There is another conversation happening outside of the world of policing in this country about how police are trained, how police act, and the civilian response to policing in this country. Is there room on a Twitter feed like yours for that conversation? Yeah,
there's room for opposite opinions and controversial police actions, or in some cases documented wrong actions, right? I mean,
these
those
exist.
are out
These
there.
do exist.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I would not be opposed to doing that. I haven't done that in the past, but I believe we're not perfect, right?
Hey.
The city of Chicago has 13,000 police officers. You're going to have, every profession is going to have people that are goofballs. And in some cases, in police, the only difference between law enforcement is what other profession can you stop somebody and take their civil rights from them?
That's exactly
right?
right. Or shoot them.
Yeah. So you have to be well trained, and you have to be, you have to be accountable for your actions. But nobody's perfect. But I think that's why law enforcement is so under scrutiny. Somebody asked me that the other day. It's like, why do you think your police are always being headlines in the news and national and stuff? Well, I don't know of any other profession where we can detain you and take your civil rights away. You can't.
That is 100% true.
And I think we need to take that seriously. And as a country, not just in Riverside, just as a country, we need to make sure that we're trained right. And we acknowledge mistakes. Unfortunately, some of the mistakes that happened recently, some of them have cost people their lives, right? That's well documented.
Undeniably.
And I don't know what the answer to that is. I always look at these young officers that I see on the news. Like I saw the one where he got out of his car and chased him and shot him down in the back. How could anybody justify that? I don't know. I don't
And
know.
he's going to jail.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. I don't even see those police chiefs standing up for those officers.
No.
So I mean, how do you? So that has to go back to what? Their training? Who does that? That has to go back to your training, and it has to go back to maybe the culture of your agency, right? So if your culture of your agency is that it's very, very aggressive agency,
Right.
and
The Daryl Gates LAPD.
yeah, I mean, if your bosses are like that, what do you think the officers are going to be like?
And I'm not trying to pile on here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I see things on. I mean, obviously, North Riverside's a cop town. I mean, there are a lot of police officers who live there.
Absolutely.
And I see a lot of back the badge. And I just feel like I don't really like anything that's binary and it has to be one or the other. It's like we're all
agree.
human beings and there's shadings and I really feel like the solution is somewhere in between and it doesn't
You're right.
have to be like saluting the flag every
I'm
time.
not so. I'm officers should back themselves and come right when they're doing their job.
Correct.
Right? In fact, I'll probably get. So I haven't released this, so I'll tell you this. But I went to this legislative meeting the other day, and we're going over the legislation coming up this year, and I'm want to float legislation that we should get. The state of Illinois should get out of the business of giving specialized license plates acknowledging that you're an FOP member,
it. Yep.
you're an Illinois Police Association member, you're a firefighter, and they make money on that because those are expensive plates. But you know what?
It's signaling.
So is an officer less likely to stop that speeder because he has an FOP
I think-
license plate? I think the answer to that is yes. We all say that, right? So if we want to make it, we want to really start to improve our profession, and we really want to make it legit. I would be for eliminating any of these special license plates that somehow an officer would say, I'm not going to stop that car because that's either the wife of a police officer or a firefighter or a paramedic or whatever.
It's so interesting that you bring this up. I took a picture from my car last year of this guy was driving down First Avenue near Ogden, actually. I was on my way to the Stevenson. He had a license plate that was completely obscured with an FOP, those medallions that go on the trunk. And I was like, any other individual who had a license plate that obscured would be on the side of the road. Truly.
Right.
And he was, of course, speeding through a red light.
I mean, I get
through a red light camera.
I get the Secretary of State. They increases their operating budget and stuff. But I don't like the specialized plates to begin with. I just think that it's less likely than you have a regular license plates that's AB 1234, and this individual has because they actually have the actual plates that are the police or fire or veteran. I mean, there's a whole list of them you can get, but I don't like
Chicago
that
Bulls
program.
fan.
Oh, we have. Well, this is another.
Maybe that's a reason to stop them.
This is another show how bad the Illinois license plate has become, and it's just the worst.
My colleagues would
I'm on record.
probably.
I know you're very
in the
stringent.
80s, but
You're very
I don't
stringent.
think some
I
of
want
my
the Blues Brothers
colleagues,
plate
chiefs,
back.
would be too happy with that. But I don't think that. I'm not
Well,
for
but
that.
what you're talking about is claiming special privilege for a class of people based on their employment, and that's a
Exactly.
problem.
Right.
That is a problem.
Because you know what? Our police officers are part of the community. And the community I don't care what community you're in, they'll support you when the officers are treated the same as anyone else. And they're part of the community. They live there, and we want, and these are, like I said about the Twitter feed, these are human beings. Well, then we also have to play the others. I don't think that we should get specialized treatment. I don't. I'm not for that.
Well, let's get this tape up and publicize that message.
Yeah.
But we
Tom,
really thank you very much.
Thank
It's a
you.
great
Thanks for
visit.
having
Really
me.
enjoyed
I
having
really
you here.
Thank
and
you
thanks
so
for your
much.
time.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.